So we're looking at Unit 5, but Learning Outcome 4, which is be able to evaluate your own practice when planning inclusive teaching and learning. There's 2 assessment criteria. 4.1, review the effectiveness of own practice when planning to meet the individual needs of learners, taking account of the views of learners and others. And then 4.2, identify areas for improvement in own planning to meet the individual needs of learners. All the PowerPoints are now up on Moodle, so you should be able to refer back to them if you need. So we're just going to look at a bit of an overview first, and because you're evaluating your own effectiveness, how do we do that and what's so important about it? So it is really important that we do monitor our own performance on as much as we could, so on a regular basis. So we need to actually monitor our own performance so that we can make sure that we're being effective within our jobs, that we're actually doing what we're setting out to do. Because it's so easy to go off track that, you know, it can be done without even realizing it. So if you're not monitoring yourself, if you're not reflecting on your own practice, if you're not looking back at yourself, you could carry on going on one track without even realizing and thinking, oh, I need to bring myself back in now. So to monitor yourself, you can get regular and useful feedback on your own performance. So this is not someone giving you gossip or giving you their own opinions, or this is, say, a trusted member of your team that you know will just talk to you about your performance. They're not going to start bringing up personal vendettas or anything. So regularly assess and analyze any improvements that need to be made. So by yourself or by helping others, or getting somebody. So maybe there's someone else that can come in and they've got a bit more knowledge than you. Maybe you can have a mentoring session with them and gain improvements. Make sure that you maintain a level of knowledge and understanding that helps you to carry out your own role effectively. Now, if I was teaching this education and training to you, and if I was teaching my healthcare students their healthcare courses, if I'm not constantly keeping on top of my knowledge, I'm not going to be able to help you in that way. So I'm constantly doing CPD. I'm doing a lot of things that are research, making sure that I'm actually guiding my students in the way that they need to be guided. So maintaining your own knowledge, working towards it is very important. This is something that you'll be doing continuously. Whichever role that you go into, you'll find that you will be doing a lot of CPD. And then adapt the way you work. So, you know, there might be a new approach, there might be some recommendations, there might have been some new standards that have been set out by the national curriculum. I mean, before the phonics itself, we used to do Jolly phonics, and then was it science? I can't remember what it was called. Letters and sounds before that, and now it's gone into read, write, ink. So there's a lot of different approaches, and even within them, even though the sounds are the same, the way you teach them are different. So you've got to keep up with those. Right, going on to 4.1, which is review the effectiveness of own practice when planning to meet the individual needs of learners and taking account of the views of learners and others. So to review your own effectiveness, you need to look at different sources of evidence you have. Now, when we're talking about sources of evidence, we're talking about your own self-assessment. You might be shadowing someone, or someone might be shadowing you if they're a new member of staff, and then you can ask for feedback and say, what do you think? You could even look at different sources of evaluations and evidence, like if you've got a one-to-one tutor evaluation that you've got going on for your students, or a formal appraisal. So these are things that you would do with your students and things you would do for yourself as well. So it's more of a holistic, you're looking at an all-rounded view. So you might look at reviews, you might look at learner feedback. So at the end of these courses, we always ask our students to, when they've finished their, completed their diplomas, they're ready for certification, we always ask if you could leave us a review. I love reading those reviews because they are quite eye-opening, because you can know that some students might say I felt rushed, or some would say that I like the pace of the course. You know, there's a lot of things that you can gain from reviews. Again, get some feedback. Sorry, just one moment, please. Sorry, Geeta, I'm back.
That's good.
So you can also look at your scheme of works. Now, your scheme of work and your lesson plans are two different things. A scheme of work is where you're pointing out exactly how the whole unit is going to go. And the lesson plan is per learning outcome or per section that you're teaching. So review your scheme of work. Make sure that you've actually got everything in it that needs to be taught and that you've not missed anything out and that you're actually achieving all of the goals that you've set. And then you can even look at, are you able to meet your time skills? So your lesson plan timings, are you able to meet the time skills that the physical time is taking you to create these schemes of work or these lesson plans? Are you able to manage that in a good way? And then you look at your content. So what are you physically teaching? What opportunities for skills development you've got? Are you actually giving students opportunities? Are you giving yourself opportunities for skills development? Are you doing the same thing day in, day out? You look at your assessment activities, the opportunities for reinforcing learning. So this could be something like simply having a small recap at the beginning of a lesson saying, okay, what sounds did we learn yesterday? Or do you remember what this symbol is? And then you do like the plus sign with your hands, or you do the takeaway sign or the addition or the times. So then you can recap if you actually understand what these things are. So you've also got your variety of learning and your teaching approaches that you use. So what sort of learning are you doing? What sort of approaches are you doing? When we did, I think it was a unit 2 where we did all the models of teaching and so on, where you actually looked into quite a few different people. There's a whole lot of models and approaches that are used, and it's not the same way for every single person. You use what suits you and your class.
Yeah.
Then you look at what development opportunities you've got to include minimum course. So there's a few things that you'd put into it. So when you're reviewing your own practice, see how effective you are. You've just got to look at all of these points on here. And then you might want to have a look at the use of team working to support development. So how can you effectively use your team? How can you establish them so you're all working in a way? Because with your class teacher now, all of you will have had little roles that you know that, okay, Geeta does maths. There's another TA that might go and do phonics. You've got your class teacher, which will do the main bulk of the work. Sometimes you might take over a maths class. So you've got a setup where you know exactly what is happening, who's planning, who's getting the lessons ready, and who's going for interventions and so on. Then you might want to get feedback from internal verification of planning. So I've put down what internal verification of planning is. So an internal verification is an approach to quality assurance based on peer support and review that enables you to integrate quality into internal assessment from start to finish. Now, in a simple way, internal verification, it just helps you to ensure that everybody has an understanding of what your standards are. So what your national standards are. For you, it would be the national curriculum and how you can actually apply them and to your daily work. And again, it also helps you to create a collaboration. So create a good teamwork between staff and any external body. So say with the national curriculum, you might have a member of staff that comes in to support you from, say, healthcare, like a behavioral psychologist or someone that might be supporting you for a child that has hearing difficulties. So it just helps you to be able to work together in an effective way. Is that okay? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. So you might also want to consider your own goals and your own progress and how to develop those. So you might want to update your technical knowledge and expertise. So depending on if this would, when you're within the primary setting and you're doing a big range of subjects, then obviously you're going to have a certain level of expertise within each one. If you decide to go and focus on one particular area, so if you come in and you say, right, I want to teach education and training when I'm qualified, I want to be able to do this, then you'd make sure that you've got your knowledge and expertise in that area. Look at your own plans and progress. Research different models and modes of delivery and assessment methodologies. So it's very important to know what type of teaching approaches there are, what suits you, and what different assessment methods that you can actually use. Because unfortunately, not everybody can be assessed in the same way. There have to be some concessions or some adaptations that need to be made. And then you can actually physically go out and develop news resources as well. Get a list of books together, web pages, videos, things that you know that will be good for you. For a lot of my healthcare students, I've got a lot of documents that I've created which have a bank of images, some tips and things onto them. So the things that I emailed to them so that they've got a little bit of extra support if they need it. So to answer 4.1, you need to review your own practice. So you just need to consider the different amounts of evidence that you have. So when you're carrying out your review, so you can look at student and peer feedback and carry out your review in that way. Look at what you're physically teaching, how long it takes you, what sort of assessment activities you do, and what your own knowledge and development is. So in this, you're just going to write a couple of I don't know why I was going to say targets, paragraphs, just reviewing how well you think you're doing, if there's any areas of improvement, and you're just going to mention that you, according to your student and your colleagues' feedback and some of these other points here.
Okay.
Is that okay? Yeah?
Yeah.
So 4.2 is identify areas for improvement in your own planning to meet the individual needs of learners. So how can you actually identify these areas? How much is it possible for you to plan for these individuals? Now, I know a lot of teachers that like staying within certain year groups. So I had a teacher that I worked with, and she loved to stay in year 2. She'd been there for about 4 years. And I asked her why. This was before I'd qualified as a teacher myself. I said, why did you stay in the same year? She said, the first year was difficult. The first year I did my planning from scratch. After that, all I've had to do every year is adapt the same plans because the content stays more or less the same. And then all I've done is adapt it for each student. And she said, every year it's become so much easier because I'm not having to start off weeks ahead in planning. All I do is adapt the same one. So if you're in one particular setting, in one particular area, then it's easier to do these things. Because all you've got to do is look out for, you get a new set of learners, and now you know this as well, having your new year 1 cohort come in. You know how difficult it is to identify what sort of learning gaps they have, what their personalities are, how they're going to learn. So there's a lot of things that you have to look at. So there's a variety of ways that this can be done. You can review your feedback. You can look at your own development goals and your own progress. So update, so it's more or less the same points as we talked previously, to be honest. Update your technical knowledge and your expertise. Look at your current plans. Look at your progress. Are you including your planning for your students? You would have carried out assessments, so you should know what sort of needs each learner has, and you should be able to adapt it for that. For some learners, you might need to do some research of different ways to deliver the lesson, of different ways to do assessment methodologies. I know that a few months ago, I had a student that told me that they have ADHD. And that was something new for me because I'd never really had a student with ADHD before. So I did a bit of research, saw what were good approaches, what were not good approaches, and I tried to adapt. It's a learning curve, but you sort of bumble through to start off with.
Mhm.
Then you're also going to any areas, remember on 4.1, you've looked at areas of where you can implement improvements. So you would have identified some areas in when you're doing a review with your own practice. You might have identified that I need to be more resourceful when I'm using resources, or I need to take into account student feedback a bit more. So you're going to say how you would do that in this section. So any points that you've identified in 4.1, just tell me how you're going to fix those, how you would implement those in here. So how, and then also look at your classroom and assessment activities. You know, for example, if that was one of the examples you use, you would say that, okay, my classroom and assessment activities are not that great. They're more or less the same thing that I use on a daily basis, and student engagement is low. So you identify those, but now how can you improve those? How can you adapt them to help your students? So you would talk about how you would fix that. Is that okay? Does that make sense, this little section here?
Yes.
Yeah. Brilliant. And then they've got some examples of what you could do to make improvements in your own planning. So some ways to make improvements, you could always, especially if planning is new to you, or if you're into a new topic and you're not 100% sure what to do, or if you just feel like you need guidance because it takes too long. So you could work alongside somebody who's got experience, so like an experienced teacher or experienced practitioner. So you'd work with them, you'd get a bit of guidance, see how they do their own planning, maybe look at an example of a lesson plan they've made, maybe sit down with them and work through your first lesson plan with them. And you'd get a lot of tips and tricks on how to go through it speedily. Because somebody who's been doing it for 20 years is going to have a lot of knowledge in how to do it. If you have a mentor, or you could ask for a mentor, you can have a discussion with them. Now, mentors are experienced people who are within the same job role, but they're also there to guide you. They're also meant to be there to be a trusted person who will help you unconditionally. So, and they'll also listen to you confidentially. So you're not worried about, spilling your guts to them and saying, oh, I'm not 100% sure on how to do this. I'm feeling quite overwhelmed. And you're not worried about them going to the staff room and telling everybody else, because there's someone that you've got a confidential relation with. And again, this is a good one as well. Sometimes it's nice to carry out your own research just to see, is there a template that I can use? Is there something else that I can have? I remember when I wanted to get a scheme of work template for you, I had one, and I wasn't too sure if it was too simple. So I asked around a few members of staff. I've got another member of staff that also teaches within a university, and he sent me a template of his scheme of work that he uses, and it was so much more detailed. So I merged both of them together. The one that he did, I thought it was a little bit too complicated, but the one that I had was a bit too simple. So you can sort of like adapt them and tweak them to suit yourself and your students. So there's loads of things that you can do. So to answer 2.2, you need to talk about what areas you have that need improvement when you are planning to meet the individual needs of learners. So you're going to look at your own development, what your knowledge is, what your research is. If you're looking at new methods, or if you feel like you should be researching new methods. Obviously, these methods of teaching will be new to you, the ones that you went over a few units ago, so you could maybe put down that I'd like to do a bit more research about them. You could also put down things like I'd like to use a range of new resources and make sure that they're available for the lessons that I want. So that's the first section. In the second section, you're just going to use the points that you looked at in 4.1 and talk about how these are going to be implemented. So you're going to look at what sort of, for example, if you'd received student or colleague feedback, whatever they've said, how you're going to implement their feedback, how you're going to adapt your lessons or change things, and then how are you going to adapt your assessment activities. So if you'd said, right, I use the same assessment for everyone, and it's not quite suitable for learners who've got English as an additional language, or it's not suitable for learners who have extra learning needs or additional learning requirements. So you would go ahead and work through there. So are you okay with 4.2?
Yes, I'm okay.
Brilliant. Thank you. Just